I make this review angry and heartbroken. Literally during the middle of watching the season 2 finale of Winning Time, I opened up Instagram and the first thing I saw was that HBO canceled the show and season 3 would not be happening. This broke my heart. One, because I'm a Laker fan, and two, Winning Time was one of the most underrated shows on television. One of the worst feelings as a TV show watcher is when a really good show that you're watching gets canceled simply off of the fact that it does not get enough ratings. I will get into more of the details of the cancellation later, but let's talk about the good stuff. Winning Time Season 2 was one of my best viewing experiences of the year. I thought that Season 1 was great, but Season 2 easily blew the first season out of the water. Everything that I had a problem with in Season 1, Season 2 corrected it. Going into this season, I was excited, but I wasn't extremely excited to where I couldn't wait for it. But while watching the season, I couldn't wait for future seasons because of how good Season 2 was shaping out to be. The performances, the cinematography, everything about this season was so much better than the first season. Now, I'm not saying that the first season was trash by any means. I love Season 1, but Season 2 is just so much more amusing to watch. But anyway, let's get into the reasons why I love this season so much. And spoiler alert for this review, even though this is literally based on history. The first thing that I want to discuss and get out of the way is the bad of this season, which isn't a lot. One of my only complaints with this season was a lot of the Jerry Buss solo scenes. Now, I understand that Jerry Buss was the one that created the Showtime Lakers, but they had some type of subplot about him and his, I think, high school ex getting back together or something like that. And respectfully, I just don't really care about those scenes as much as I care about the Lakers stuff. I understand why they wanted to add these scenes because he was ultimately the owner of the Lakers, and it's probably one of those things where fans would probably complain that the show doesn't focus as much on him since he's basically the main character of the show after Magic Johnson. But honestly, a lot of the Jerry Buss solo scenes this season were just more about him getting back with his ex and his daughter Jeannie Buss having to kind of accept the fact that her dad was with another woman, and I was just waiting for the Lakers stuff, to be honest. Another complaint that I had with this season literally connects with one of the best parts of this season, which was the pacing, well, most specifically the basketball scenes. My biggest complaint with season 1 was the lack of basketball scenes and the fact that they spent the whole first season on only the 1979 through 80 season. This season they changed that drastically and covered the 1980 through 1984 basketball seasons, which I loved. But with that love also comes a negative that I noticed, which was the fact that they quickly brushed through some of the important things during the Lakers dynasty. My biggest example was the 1982 NBA championship that the Lakers won. I feel like in the show they didn't make it as big of a deal as it should have been. They opened up episode 6 with them celebrating the championship in 1982, but then immediately after the intro, it just goes into 1 year later where the Lakers are playing the 76ers in the NBA Finals again in 1983. Keep in mind that this season only had 7 episodes compared to the 10 episodes that season 1 had, so they probably had to either rush some of this season because they knew that they weren't getting a season 3, or because they were just mainly focused on trying to get to the Lakers and Celtics rivalry, which was the main theme of this season. I think that is a mix of both, since the season ended with like a Coach Carter / Glory Road type of ending where they tell the audience everything that happened in real life after the events. But other than those two complaints, I don't really have anything bad to say about this season. The complaints that I did have didn't really ruin the season for me or really even bother me that much, just because it was so entertaining to watch. Now let's get into the great. Not even the good, the great. And man, there's a lot of great. Number 1, I want to talk about the pacing, which was so much better than the first season. After watching the trailer, I was excited to see that they were going to focus this season more on just a singular Lakers season like the first season did. Like I said earlier, this season went through the 1980 through 84 NBA seasons, and I was glad that they did this. While season 1 was great, after finishing it, I was thinking that this show was going to need 10 seasons because I thought that they were going to go through every single Lakers season during the 80s dynasty. But they immediately fixed this issue and paced the season well for the most part, to where they put out a lot of information in one season with only 7 episodes. And even though I said that the writers somewhat rushing the season was a bad, I actually somewhat like it. There's no point of pointing out every game that they played or going through an entire year like they did in the first season. And I think the writers realized that. There's not really any dragging out of the scenes, and even when there is, it's not intolerable because you're learning something. Speaking of learning something, next I want to discuss the history factor of this show. Now, obviously this show is based on real life. The Lakers are one of the most popular sports teams of all time, and the Lakers dynasty in the 80s were one of the most important teams in NBA history, since them, along with the rival Celtics, are credited for reviving basketball in the NBA. The way that they depict history in this show is amazing. A big thing with biopics is that they often dramatize so many things to remind you that it is a TV depiction of what actually happened in real life. But this show makes it clear that it is a dramatization of history, and it doesn't feel like it's too dramatic. I really like how when there is a super dramatic or crazy thing that happens in the show will literally break the fourth wall and say, yes, this actually happened. They're super true to what happened in real life, at least for the most part. Even with the basketball scenes, they recreate a lot of plays that happen in real life, and when you match them up with the real plays, they look nearly identical. This show also has taught me stuff about my favorite team that I didn't know. I've been a Laker fan my whole life, and I never knew that Magic Johnson signed a $25 million contract for 25 years, which was the most expensive contract in all of sports at the time. Yes, that actually happened. I also didn't know that Magic Johnson got hurt in the 1980-81 season and missed 12 weeks, which is the reason why they didn't repeat. Or the fact that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's house burned down in 1983. I didn't know that at all. This part isn't about the Lakers in particular, but I believe in episode 3 they had a flashback episode where it would show all the Lakers stuff, then go back to the 70s where they gave us some backstory on Larry Bird, and I had no idea that he dropped out of college and that he almost didn't go back until he was presented with the opportunity to play for Indiana State. There's not that many moments in the season that made me think that didn't actually happen, they're just being dramatic. One of my favorite parts of the season is how they take this history and write it to where it feels like it's a fictional TV show. That's why I feel like it's so good as a show. They take real life history and make it feel like it is something that somebody wrote out for a concept of a show. It left me actually waiting for the next episode as if this wasn't a historical show, because I wasn't alive to see and hear about all this stuff happening in the 80s. The build-up of Norm Nixon and Magic Johnson's beef was great since they had low-key been beefing since season 1. The build-up of Magic Johnson and Paul Westhead's beef was great, leading to him getting fired and Pat Riley being the head coach. See, until this show, I didn't even know that the 80s Lakers had other coaches other than Pat Riley. I grew up thinking that Pat Riley was the coach throughout the whole dynasty, but this show taught me that. The historical factor of this show is very informative and not too dramatic, well, at least for me. This next category I'm going to label the performances, which is where I will talk about the acting and the cinematography of the show. The acting in this season was great. The standout performances are Quincy Isaiah as Magic Johnson, Adrian Brody as Pat Riley, and John C. Reilly as Jerry Buss. Adrian Brody's performance as Pat Riley was the best performance in the entire season for me. It was great seeing him go from the laid-back assistant coach in season 1 in the first half of season 2 to the serious no F's given head coach. The scene where he first gets inaugurated as the head coach and the Lakers are struggling and are not really respecting him as the coach, he literally snaps at everybody, but that was one of the few moments where I said that this probably didn't happen in real life. But it worked from a show standpoint because it points out what was really wrong with that team at the time. And Adrian Brody made it better with how he delivered it. Quincy Isaiah also had an amazing performance as Magic Johnson this season. He did great in season 1, but I feel like he was able to expand his acting ability this time around. My favorite scene in the entire season was when Magic Johnson requested a trade, which I also didn't know that he did, and he talks to Jerry Buss. Their argument was so well acted and well set up, with no music and just straight acting from the both of them. John C. Reilly's performance was great simply off the fact that he does so well in this show as Jerry Buss, and he's mostly known to be a comedic actor. Like, I never thought that the voice of freaking Wreck-It Ralph would be such a great serious actor. Solomon Hughes and Jason Clarke also give great performances as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Jerry West. Jerry West is probably my favorite character in the whole show because of the way that Jason Clarke plays him. He's just funny, even though the real Jerry West doesn't really appreciate the way that he's depicted in the show. Another one of my favorite scenes in the season, simply off of the acting, was when one of the players got traded from the Lakers mid-season, and the actor's angry performance of literally being traded after selling his life in LA was really eye-opening because it makes you realize and remember that sports are a business, and that it's really like that for some players when they get traded. Overall, the acting this season was great and was really effective for a dramatic biopic about a basketball team. But my absolute favorite part of this season were the basketball scenes and the cinematography. The basketball scenes are shot so much differently from your normal basketball movie or show. At times it feels like you were playing with the players on the court with the way that they move the camera with the movements of the players as if you were traveling with them. And like I said earlier, the choreographers set up certain reenactments of plays so identically to the real life plays. I also love how the show is so true to the 80s setting. At certain points they will add a vintage filter to make it look like it was shot in the 80s. They also add certain filters to show the mood of the scene. Most specifically, they add a black and white filter during a lot of the serious scenes. I also think that they did a good job of portraying how a certain character is feeling versus what is actually happening. For example, a couple of times throughout the season, they show Magic Johnson in his zone and they set up the scenes in an isolated dark version of the court where he's just doing his thing. I just thought that the cinematography was so much different from your average show. Now unfortunately, that's all the good that I have to say about this season, because now I just want to take a moment to discuss more about the cancellation of the show. So like I said earlier, almost immediately after the finale premiered, HBO announced the cancellation of the show. This is so heartbreaking because it was simply off of the fact that ratings were so much lower from the first season, and that is partly because of the writers and actors strike that is currently going on right now. They couldn't really promote the show at all. A show getting canceled because of low ratings is the worst when you're one of the few people that watch it, especially when the show is so underrated. And Winning Time was easily one of the most underrated shows out. Am I saying that because I'm a biased Laker fan? Yes and no. Because the show itself was good from a filmmaking standpoint. This show easily could have been a piece of garbage with no effort put into it just to make money, but you could tell that everyone involved was putting their all into it. And it's even worse that HBO ended this show off of a Celtics championship. The last episode of the show was about the '84 finals and how the Lakers lost. Now that's just rude. How are you gonna have a show called Winning Time and end it with the freaking Celtics winning a championship? That's why I can't tell if the show was meant to be canceled before season 2 even came out, or if it just happened based on the ratings and the writer strike. This cancellation was just so unfortunate, not only because the show was amazing, but it just had so much potential. We didn't even get to see the Lakers get their revenge on the Celtics, which happened twice in real life in 1985 and 1987. This concept that they had could have ventured out into other spin-offs like a Shaq and Kobe Lakers show about their dynasty. Imagine if Winning Time had kept going and they ended off the show with Magic Johnson coming back to the Lakers in 1996, 5 years after his HIV diagnosis, which actually happened in real life. And side note, they actually started off this show by showing us Magic about to make the HIV announcement. But anyway, imagine after Magic's last game, you have a scene with him and Jerry West talking about the upcoming draft, and he tells them about a skinny high school kid from Philadelphia that he's been looking at, which is ultimately Kobe Bryant. That situation most likely didn't happen in real life, but they could have did it just to tease a show or even a continuation with Shaq and Kobe's dynasty. That probably would not have happened, but those were the possibilities with this show, and I will miss it very much. Enough reminiscing about what could have been, let's give this thing a rating. This season was amazing. The acting, the pacing, the cinematography, everything about it was almost perfect. Even if you aren't a sports fan, you will like this show. It is very informative and entertaining. So I'm going to give Winning Time Season 2 a 9.8 out of 10. Amazing, but not perfect. And I just have one more thing to say. Screw HBO.